cardboard box smelled of dust and forgotten time, a scent both musty and sweet, like decaying paper and the faint, lingering aroma of celluloid. Elias, a collector of life's discarded ephemera, had purchased it at a liquidation sale of assets from the long-defunct local television station, WVR-TV Channel 38. The station had gone dark in the early 90s, a casualty of the expanding cable giants, its archives relegated to a climate-controlled storage unit, and then finally to the auction block. Inside the box, amidst a tangle of Betacam and pneumatic tapes, was a single VHS. Its label, typed out on a now yellowed adhesive strip, read, "Smiley's Fun House, Final Episode." Elias, a man who found a strange solace in the analog ghosts of a bygone era, felt a familiar thrill. He imagined a low-budget children's show, a relic of a simpler time, perhaps a charmingly inept production with hand-stitched puppets and a host with a too-wide smile. That evening, a storm rattled the windows of his secluded home, the wind a low moan through the eaves. Elias, a man who had curated his life to a state of quiet isolation, found the tempest a fitting soundtrack for his latest acquisition. He slid the tape into his VCR, the machine whirring and clunking with a satisfying physicality. The television screen flickered to life, awash in a sea of static before resolving into a surprisingly crisp image. The set of Smiley's Fun House was a riot of primary colors, a crudely painted backdrop of a whimsical candy-striped house, a cheerful, tinny jingle, the kind of earworm that burrows deep and festers, played over the opening credits. And then there was Smiley. The puppet was a thing of stitched felt and painted wood, a caricature of a clown with a perpetually beaming red-lipped smile. Its eyes, however, were its most arresting feature. They were large, glassy orbs of a disturbingly pale blue, fixed in a wide, unblinking stare. The puppeteer was skilled, that much was certain. Smiley's movements were fluid, almost too fluid, lacking the gentle, gravity-bound sway of a typical hand puppet. It moved with a twitchy, unnatural grace, its head cocking at an angle that seemed to defy the unseen hand within. A disembodied, pre-recorded voice, saccharine and yet possessing a strange, flat affect, spoke for the puppet. "Hello, children," it chirped, the words slightly out of sync with the clacking of Smiley's wooden jaw. "Are you ready to have some fun?" Elias watched, a faint nostalgic smile on his lips. The show was as endearingly amateurish as he had hoped. Smiley offered nonsensical life lessons, his stitched lips flapping along to the pre-recorded track. "If a grown-up tells you a secret," the puppet advised, its head tilting in that unsettling way, "it's your special secret to keep. Even if it makes you feel funny inside, that's just the happiness trying to get out." Elias frowned, a strange sentiment for a children's show. He chalked it up to the less than scrutinized standards of 1980s local programming. As the episode progressed, however, the advice grew more and more sinister. "Sometimes friends don't want to play your games," Smiley's voice droned, the cheerful inflection now sounding forced and thin. "But if you're persistent, they'll learn to like what you like. Just don't let them leave. Friends shouldn't leave." The camera work was rudimentary, often lingering on the puppet's face for uncomfortable lengths of time. In these moments, Elias could have sworn he saw something shift in the puppet's fixed gaze, a flicker of something akin to awareness, a malevolent intelligence churning behind the glass orbs. He leaned closer to the screen, the rain lashing against the window panes. "And remember," the voice cooed, the jingle starting up again, now sounding discordant and menacing. Smiley is always watching. Smiley knows if you've been good or bad, and Smiley knows where you live. The final shot was a long, slow zoom into Smiley's face. The painted smile, once a symbol of childhood mirth, now seemed a rictus of insatiable hunger. The screen dissolved into static. The tape ended. Elias sat back, the silence of the house pressing in on him. The storm outside had subsided to a low drizzle. He ejected the tape, its plastic casing now feeling strangely cold to the touch. He told himself it was just a poorly conceived children's program, a product of a less sensitive time. But a seed of unease had been planted. The following days were marked by a subtle but persistent erosion of his carefully constructed solitude. It began with sounds, a soft, dragging noise from the attic, like felt being pulled across rough wood. The faint, tinny echo of a jingle he couldn't quite place, seemingly carried on the wind. He would dismiss them as the creaks and groans of an old house, the tricks of an overactive imagination. Then came the visual disturbances, a flash of primary colors in his peripheral vision, gone when he turned his head, a shape in the corner of his eye that mimicked the silhouette of a seated figure, only to reveal itself as a pile of laundry. The dread, however, began to truly take root when he started seeing the smile, a fleeting glimpse of a wide red curve in the reflection of a darkened window, the crescent shape of a grin in the grain of the wooden floorboards. He stopped sleeping. His nights were spent in a state of hyper-vigilant wakefulness, his ears straining to decipher every creak and rustle of the house. The silence, once a comfort, was now a canvas upon which his fear painted its most terrifying masterpieces. He began to feel a presence in the house, a silent, watchful entity that seemed to revel in his mounting terror. His own home, his sanctuary, had become a cage. One evening, as twilight bled into darkness, he was in his study, the room filled with the comforting scent of old books. He was trying to lose himself in a first edition, the feel of the worn leather a familiar anchor in his sea of anxiety. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Elias froze, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He told himself it was the house settling. But then came another sound, a soft, rhythmic thump, 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 like a small, padded footfall. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from his chair, his body trembling. He peered into the dimly lit hallway. At the far end, where the shadows were deepest, he saw it. A small figure, no more than 3 feet high, was standing there. It was just a silhouette, a vaguely humanoid shape against the gloam. And then it moved. It cocked its head to the side, that same unnatural bird-like tilt from the videotape. A strangled cry escaped Elias's lips. He stumbled back into the study, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was losing his mind. It had to be a hallucination, a waking nightmare born of sleep deprivation and paranoia. He squeezed his eyes shut, praying for it to be gone when he opened them. When he dared to look again, the hallway was empty, but the air was thick with a cloying sweetness, the artificial scent of cheap candy. And on the hardwood floor, where the figure had stood, was a single, long scratch in the varnish, as if something made of wood had been dragged across it. The final descent was swift and brutal. The subtle implications gave way to overt terror. He would find his books rearranged on the shelves, spelling out the word smile. The television would turn on by itself in the middle of the night, the screen a maelstrom of static, the faint, distorted strains of the Funhouse jingle just audible beneath the hiss. He started to smell it everywhere, the phantom scent of felt and decay. He knew he had to get rid of the tape. In a frenzy of desperate clarity, he snatched the VHS from his desk and ran out into the still, damp night. He built a pyre in his backyard, a frantic heap of dried leaves and twigs. He doused it in lighter fluid, the chemical tang a harsh counterpoint to the cloying sweetness that now seemed to cling to his skin. He tossed the tape onto the pyre and struck a match. The flames roared to life, a hungry orange beast devouring the darkness. He watched as the plastic casing of the VHS warped and melted, a sense of profound relief washing over him. It was over. He returned to the house, the smell of smoke in his hair. The silence that greeted him was different this time. It was not the oppressive silence of a watchful presence, but the empty, hollow silence of a tomb. He walked through the rooms of his home, a stranger in a familiar land. The shadows no longer held a discernible shape, but they were deeper, colder, somehow more absolute. He went to his bedroom and collapsed onto the bed, the exhaustion of the past week finally claiming him. He fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first in what felt like an eternity. When he awoke, the morning sun was streaming through the window. For a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. It was a new day. The nightmare was over. He had burned the source of his terror. He swung his legs out of bed, his feet touching the cool wooden floor. And then he saw it, lying in the center of the room, as if placed there by an unseen hand, was a single object. It was a small, hand-stitched puppet of a clown, its felt body slightly scorched, its wooden head blackened by fire. And on its face, untouched by the flames, was a wide red painted smile. Its pale blue, glassy eyes stared up at him, and in their depths, he saw a reflection of his own screaming face, a tiny, silent effigy of a man who had looked into the uncanny valley and had found something looking back. The jingle began to play, not from a television, but from the very air around him, a cheerful, tinny melody that promised an eternity of fun. And in the oppressive silence of his own mind, a single, saccharine sweet, pre-recorded phrase echoed, "Smiley is always watching."